Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Welcome to our special Can California Be Saved? And I'm also going to make the point here that we as conservatives should want California to be saved. I know it is very easy, and I've made these jokes many times before, like, oh, we should just have California just cut off and go into the ocean or whatever. I want California to be red again. We'll talk about how we lost it and how we can get it back in today's special. So I lived in San Diego for about 12 years. All 4 of my kids were born there. I still have a local radio show there as well with the SiriusXM national show. So that's my authority on California. California used to be a red state. Now, California has voted Democrat in every election, presidential election since 1992. But before that, Republicans won the state in every election from 1952 until 1988, except for 1 year, 1964, they voted for LBJ. But this is it used to be a red state. Nixon and Reagan both hail from California. California used to be a wonderful place to live. Until like 1990 or so, the reputation of California was California's clean, well-governed, and fun. Let's work through those 3. Let's start with the fun part. California had a very specific culture. That's it. That is the culture of California. Was the culture of California, right? This beach boys, surfboard, convertibles on the beach. Like that was a unique culture in California, combined with Top Gun. At least when I was in San Diego, right, where Top Gun was based and filmed, right? Like California had like this old school Top Gun swagger cool, right? And it doesn't have that anymore. It's gone. That swagger is gone. That California culture is gone. Hey dude, like even like the California like accent, like doesn't exist, not there. We'll get more to that in a little bit. California was also a well-run state. Right? At one point, there weren't a lot of people in California. Then Pat Brown became the governor, and in the 60s, California built everything. They built the entire University of California college system in 1968, built all the highways across the state, all the water storage and water projects and irrigation systems, because it was all focused on people, humans, making life better. Human flourishing was the goal of the California government under Pat Brown. That's when all the power plants were built. In the 60s, 70s, 80s. There's only one left. There's only one nuclear power plant left in California. They were going to tear them all down, but they had to leave over in that last one. They extended it for just a couple of years because they had to. Like the power would have gone out for tens of hundreds of thousands of people, right? So they had to keep it against their great environmentalist desires. But everything that is good about California was from the 60s. So California went from a clean, well-run and cool state to a filthy, horribly run and culturally non-distinct state. And then expensive on top of that. So how could anyone live there? Now the question is, how did this happen? Well, a couple things happened. First, their open immigration policy, or sanctuary city policies, attracted not only immigrants, but a certain type of immigrant. Legal or illegal, it doesn't really matter, right? They attracted a certain type. There's been some analysis done comparing Texas immigrants with California immigrants. Actually, this study I'm speaking of specifically is Hispanics. So Hispanics in California versus Hispanics in Texas. And on the whole, Texas attracted a more entrepreneurial-minded and therefore also a more conservative worldview immigrant. And California attracted the opposite of that. Already over a third of Californians in total are on government welfare in some way. And that includes illegal aliens. Like illegal aliens are eligible for all this stuff. More recently, the state assembly and Senate passed a bill giving $150,000 for a down payment on a house for illegal aliens. Okay? That type of government, that type of magnet is going to attract a certain type of immigrant, legal or illegal. And you do that for decades, well, you're going to get a very different place, which California now is. Another thing, another force at play in California, they'll pass some bill and any sane-minded person across the country will say, that's insane. What is wrong with you people? What do you want people to move? And the answer is yeah, they do. They want people to leave. The Democrats in California want certain people to leave. They want the illegal aliens to come in because they're dependent on them. But they want conservatives to leave. It's called the Curley effect. The idea of it is, I don't care if you leave because you're my enemy. That's what Gavin Newsom would say. I don't care if you leave, conservative activist, because you're my enemy and you're not going to vote for me, so get out of here. It's called Curley effect. It's named after James Curley. He was the 4-time mayor of Boston in early 1900s. And his stated goal, this is like out in the open, was he wanted to kick out all of his opponents. In particular, people who weren't Irish. But in general, just anyone out of the city. This also happened in Chicago with the black mayor. It's like same idea. Like, we want to make things so oppressive for my enemy that they just leave. Now, any normal person would look at that and be like, well, that's horrible. How could a mayor act like that? Or how could a governor act like that? To hurt people so badly that they move, to make life so intolerable and so difficult to exist that people just leave. Like, that's terrible. Well, you're a normal person. Of course you think that. But James Curley and Gavin Newsom, people like that, they just want power. And one way to keep power is to keep out all your would-be opponents. Get them out, kick them out, and say good riddance. It's called the Curley effect. I think there's been a lot of that in California over the last couple of decades. You hear a business or conservatives will move out of California. I think Gavin Newsom and a lot of these Democrats say, good, one less vote against me in the next election. Another force to consider with California is Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley has propped up California for the last few decades now. But there's no real reason why Silicon Valley is in San Francisco. The only reason it's there is because of a guy named William Shockley. Back in the 50s, William Shockley was one of the top scientists in the world, and he focused his research on semiconductors. And he worked for Bell Labs in New Jersey. But then his mom got sick, and he went to go take care of his mom in this sleepy little town called Palo Alto. And he brought with him a bunch of his scientists and opened up a place called Shockley Semiconductor Laboratory. And 8 of these people at this laboratory went on to leave. They're called the Traitorous 8, if you want to search this up and do your own research. And these Traitorous 8 went on to found all the initial first big companies in what is now known as Silicon Valley, Intel and AMD and a bunch of these other big companies. And that's when Palo Alto, and that's why Palo Alto became this hotbed of computers. My point of bringing this story up is, if William Shockley's mom lived in Tulsa, then Silicon Valley would be in Tulsa. If William Shockley's mom lived in Cleveland, then that's where he would have gone, and that's where the Traitorous 8 would have set up their companies, and Silicon Valley would be Cleveland. And I like this hit me when I was growing up. I was like, why is it called Silicon Valley? Like, is there a lot of silicon there? It's like a lot of natural resources of silicon. Like, no, that's what William Shockley's mom lived there. And it just so happens to be really nice weather too, so a lot of people stayed. But there's no reason for Silicon Valley to be in California in the first place. So why does this matter? Well, if there's no reason for it to have been there in the first place, there's also no reason that it would stay there forever. And Democrats in California have been able to kick out a lot of conservatives and a lot of businesses and not feel the consequences of it because Silicon Valley was making them so much money. But there doesn't have to be there won't be a Silicon Valley forever. California's rested on these laurels for a long time. Right now, the richest 10% of Californians pay 70% of the income tax. The richest 1%, most in Silicon Valley, pay 50% of all the income taxes in California. So California's been able to rely on just a few people in order to pay most of the income tax. Now, the money in Silicon Valley is waning. The power of Silicon Valley is waning. We have tech hubs opening up all over the country now. Also, maybe tech people are becoming even more conservative now, which won't help Sacramento, the governor there either. So that's an interesting dynamic that's happened in the last few decades that's changing now. And it's not going to be good for the Democrats in power. So that's a hopeful point. I forgot to mention the filthiness. I'm sorry. The California is now filthy. So it's poorly run and super expensive and disgusting. That's a bathroom. That's a public bathroom in San Diego. San Diego has a major public bathroom problem. There's very few of them, but the ones that exist look like that. the city council built a public toilet. It's literally just a toilet. It's called a Portland loo. It's just like a little cylinder box that you go. It's just one toilet. And it cost $600,000. This was back in 2010. $600,000 just to build a toilet. And the drugs and prostitution were so bad that they hired a security guard for $100,000 a year to guard it as well. So that's just an example. It's just disgusting. It's just a disgusting place now. Decades of bad governance can really do a number on a place. Now let me end on this before we get to our great guests. I don't want this to be the case. For a long time, so I used to live in Tennessee. I first lived in Tennessee after college, and then I moved to San Diego for 12 years. And when I was in Tennessee, it was really fun and easy to make fun of California. And then I moved to California. And then I moved out, now I'm back in Tennessee again, right? But I don't want California to be awful. I don't want it to be a terrible place. I don't want it to be run by Gavin Newsom. There's the old Aesop fable, the country mouse and the city mouse. Aesop wrote this 2,600 years ago, right? So these are ancient, timeless truths. I'm a country mouse, right? So I'd rather be in Tennessee. Obviously, it's where I am, right? And it's easy for people like me to wish for a demise of our cities or wish for a demise of California, right? They got what they voted for and they should get it good and hard. I get that. I believed that and I made those jokes and all that. But now that I think about it, I actually would prefer that our cities be thriving and wonderful and clean and safe and the crown jewels of our wonderful country. I want to be proud of our cities. I want New York City to be great again. I want California to be great again. I want Los Angeles and San Francisco to be great, just like America. It's a part of America. California used to be a solidly red state, and I believe it can be again. And I think that's true with Boston, and I think it's true in New York, I think it's true with Chicago. It's going to take a lot of work, but it's been kickstarted by Trump. The failures of the left's governance is clearer than ever, especially in California with the wildfires. It's clearer than ever. People are starting to wake up. And if we continue to win in DC with Trump and Doge and all that, people will be able to see the stark difference between their progressive leadership that they've been living under, this tyranny they've been living under for all these decades, and this new conservative leadership and governance, and how much better this is. And people are going to say, wow, I want that actually. So my goal for this MAGA movement is to win so much that even California turns red. That to me would be proof of a total MAGA victory. We have wonderful guests from California, including the leader of the Senate, the minority leader in the Assembly, to tell us about California, Chef Gruel, and then our Breitbart guys, all right, the editor-in-chief and senior editor, who are all California guys through and through in every way. We'll talk to them next right here on the First TV.
They said, we have no water. I said, do you have a drought? No, we don't have a drought. I said, why don't you have no water? Because the water isn't allowed to flow down. It's got a natural flow from Canada all the way up north of water, more water than they could ever use. And in order to protect a tiny little fish, the water up north gets routed into the Pacific Ocean. Millions and millions of gallons of water gets poured. I could have water for all of that land. Water for your forests. Your forests are dry as a bone.
Yeah.
Okay?
Dangerous.
That water could be routed. You could have everything. Oh, not only dangerous, billions of dollars a year they spend on forest fires. And, there's a case with the environment. They're not allowed to rake their forests because you're not allowed to touch it. And all they have to do is clean their forest, meaning rake it up, get rid of the leaves, get rid of, leaves that are sitting there for 5 years. And
we'll certainly get rid of the dead fall.
And get rid of the trees that are fallen that are like.
It's Donald Trump right before the election talking to former California resident Joe Rogan. Want to go to current California residents Alex Marlow, who's the editor-in-chief of Breitbart.com, and Joel Pollack, senior editor-at-large of Breitbart News as well. Gentlemen, great to talk to you guys. Alex, I want to start with you. I think this is an important place to set the table here. Why is California important to America? I say there's a lot of conservatives. I made these jokes before I lived in California. It's like, oh, who cares? Like California, put them in the ocean. What's it matter? They get what they deserve. A bunch of Democrats over there. Who cares? And I just want to rebuke that. Why does California matter to this country?
Yeah, if you want to start at a romantic level, it really is representative of the American dream. People going west is very symbolic And what we found when we got here was incredible. It was an abundance of wealth. It was natural resources. It was mountains and snow. It was picturesque beaches. It was deserts. It was all sort of different foliage and vegetation. And it was just the most amazing breadbasket to build society. So it was the reward for bravery and a pioneering spirit, because you get to be in California, which is some of the greatest climate topography on planet Earth. And then what we did here for many years was incredible. We created the centerpiece of our culture, Hollywood, which exported Americana all around the world. And people thrived. And a lot of it is still here in our DNA. Now, we've lost the plot politically, but in a way, I think it's really important to remember our history. Think about how classic Republicans, from Richard Nixon to Ronald Reagan, all the way up to the contemporary people like Andrew Breitbart and Ben Shapiro and the Hoover Institution, the Claremont Institution, and so many of your favorite Twitter personalities, the Mike Cernoviches of the world, and of course Breitbart News. We're headquartered here. PragerU is out here. It's Larry Elder, a lot of the Salem talk show hosts. There's so many people who have been the leading lights of modern conservatism were out here in California. And it is a long history of being the epitome of the American dream, but also this incubator of deep conservative thought. So I'm glad you started there, Mike, because it really is an important point to emphasize.
Yeah, I don't want to give up on it. Joel, and if you want to comment on that, I'd love to hear it. But if everyone doesn't know, your house was barely spared in the recent wildfires, praise God. But you have been instrumental in covering the cleanup and Trump's involvement with California now, and you're on the front lines here, and I'm so grateful. What can we learn as a nation about the corruption that has infiltrated Los Angeles that maybe, hopefully, people are starting to see? What do we need to know?
Well, there's a disconnect between politicians and results. Democrats keep getting elected and reelected in California despite a track record of failure. That's not to say Republicans have done much better. Jerry Brown was elected to return to the governorship in 2010 after Arnold Schwarzenegger had a disastrous second term where the state basically ran out of money. And I think that sealed the fate of the Republican Party in California for quite a long time to come. But still, there's no correlation between performance and results. We've started to see a little bit of a pushback with voters throwing out their district attorneys, the George Soros-funded prosecutors in Oakland and here in Los Angeles, because the crime wave just became too much for people to bear. So you're starting to see a bit of a backlash. But I don't think that voters are yet holding the state's leaders accountable. So, for example, in a recent poll that we had the exclusive on from Rasmussen, the voters of LA lost confidence in Mayor Karen Bass, who was out of town when the fires started, but they still showed strong support for Governor Gavin Newsom, even though he has failed on wildlife prevention, and his policy of clearing forests, or lack of a policy to clear forests, was criticized not by Breitbart, but by Capital Public Radio, which is a left-wing outlet. There's a universal recognition by people who understand how the state works or doesn't work that Newsom is basically a failure on policy. And yet he was reelected, and Democrats like Newsom are going to get reelected for the foreseeable future, unless there really is a strong alternative. But the traditional voting base of the Republican Party, that is homeowners and small business owners, has left the state. They are already in other places that have lower taxes, lower costs of living, fewer regulations. Maybe the weather isn't as good, and maybe there aren't as many opportunities, but they feel more confident that they're going to be governed in the public interest. There's no sense that the people we elect to govern, whether at the local level or state level, are really concerned fundamentally with the first priorities of government, which is to protect the people who live where you govern. And what I've seen, despite the efforts of some committed public servants, what I've seen is that there's a general evasion. No one wants to talk about the problems that caused this devastation. No one wants to talk about the lack of an emergency plan, the fact that the water ran out, not just in Palisades, I learned yesterday, but also in Altadena. I went to the Eaton fire in Altadena, and they also lost water pressure. That's because our water systems are designed for house fires, not for wildfires. And yet our state's leaders have been telling us that climate change is going to bring more wildfires. So why didn't they plan for different systems to deal with the threat? And I don't think that the right discussions are happening yet. We do see a lot of positive intervention by President Trump and by Rick Grinnell, who's his representative on the ground here. That's going very well. Rick Grinnell is keeping people on their toes and making sure that local and state officials are doing what's necessary to assist the cleanup. But there still is no discussion or debate about what needs to change in the state to make sure this never happens again. So the disconnect between politicians and results is the major reason that California is the way it is.
Amazing. I got 4 minutes. I want to ask one more question to both of you guys. Alex, there was a glimmer of hope when these fires were happening that people in California would start to wake up. If not this, what is a rock bottom? And what's your advice to conservatives in California to maybe take the state back?
Yeah, this is really exciting. And a lot of us here who are out here conservatives, we think of this as really the best opportunity we've ever had, and maybe the last opportunity we've ever had to make some headway with getting people to work our worldview, because it's not just that we weren't prepared for the fires. The mismanagement since then has been kind of nuts. The delays in terms of letting people get back to their homes, the fact that all these FEMA funds that are getting stolen essentially by people who are impersonating all sorts of different people in order to collect money that was for people who lost their houses. And now we're seeing that the money for the people who had their houses burned down is getting sent to homeless people, so people who didn't have homes to begin with, and they're getting some of the FEMA aid. If that keeps up and this level of government incompetence persists, and then people are starting to rebuild and there's too many permits, there's too much onerous red tape and oversight. And you saw the way Gavin Newsom was not present at all. Karen Bass was in Africa despite pledging not to leave the country when she was mayor of LA. All this stuff adds up to, what are we doing here to keep voting for Democrats? So people are either going to see it now or they're never going to see it. So it's really important for us in California, we conservatives, to try to make sure that we get as much political gain as we can. Look, I hate to be cynical about it, but the damage is done, and now it's important to remind people that the left blew this, they messed it up in favor of the Delta smelt, and you can't give them power anymore.
Yeah. Joel, we got about 60 seconds. Can California be red again?
I think more important than whether it's red or blue is whether it's a livable state. I think right now, frankly, the best hope for California is that a Democratic candidate will emerge who can adopt conservative solutions to California's problems. There really is a psychological barrier in California to liberal voters in voting for a Republican. They might do it if they have to, but when you look at Republicans who've succeeded in local races, it's because they dropped their party affiliation or because they campaigned as Democrats. I do think there's a psychological and cultural barrier that is not going to be broken in the near future. So I'm hoping that we can win the battle of ideas rather than the battle of parties and get someone elected in important state office and state offices in California who understands the importance of conservative policies, even if they have a D after their name.
Really well said. Breitbart News, holding down fort in California, rooted in California as well. Alex Marlow, editor-in-chief, and Joel Pollack, senior editor-at-large. Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Mike.
And truly, guys, thank you for living in California and for staying in California and for fighting for California. As I said in the opening, we want to make America great again. And the proof of victory of making America great again is when California goes red or goes conservative or starts being a good state once again. Coming up next, we'll talk to a Republican, the Republican leader in the state assembly. Next, right here, First TV, spread the word.
You can't rebuild the same. So we have to rebuild with science. We have to build with climate reality in mind.
Yeah, climate reality in mind. James Gallagher is here. He is the Republican leader in the state assembly in Sacramento in the great state of California. James, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing all right. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, thanks for fighting for California still. So we talked about how California used to be a red state, and we talked about it for presidential elections, but California used to have amazing Republican governors, right? Reagan was a governor. Duke Majan was a great governor. Pete Wilson was an amazing governor. Schwarzenegger's a bit of an outlier, and he blew it at the end. But we had red Republican, good, solid governors. How did we lose that? How did the Dems take over California in the first place?
Great legacy here, Reagan. And I think what happened over time is one, the Democrats made a very aggressive political move, reaching out to Latino voters, for example, that were a very growing demographic in the state. And, we, I think as a party, just really fell behind on aggressive campaigning, going out there, reaching voters, raising money. Schwarzenegger became the governor and he had a lot of celebrity, but he didn't really do a whole lot to really help the cause and bring more people on board. So I think that sort of hurt us. Here recently, though, I think we've gotten back on track. You saw in these recent elections that we, are starting to make really big gains amongst Latino voters, for instance. Trump won Imperial County in California, which is a, huge Latino demographic in the state. And so we want to continue to build on that. And I think we can get back to those days of Reagan.
Yeah, Imperial County right on the border as well. It's wild because it's not like the Democrats have done a great job running the place. How do you characterize how bad Gray Davis, Jerry Brown, and Gavin Newsom have been as Democrat governors?
I mean, just terrible. I mean, if you look, and this is something we've really been pointing out, and that, going to that aggressive strategy of going out there and talking about the failures of the Democrats. I mean, they've had all power, for at least the last 15 years in this state. And what have we gotten? We have the highest homelessness. We have the highest poverty, infrastructure that's falling apart, dams that, fail, wildfires that rage out of control because we're not doing anything to mitigate fuel. And so all these things, I think, are really making it, are exhibit A of the failure of Democratic leadership.
And we were just talking with some guys from Breitbart, and one of them's house almost burned down. All the houses right around him burned down. And we're like, wow, this would be a great opportunity for conservatives, or for it to be clear to people that they've been failed by their Democratic representatives, right? But I don't know. I don't know if maybe they even get it now. What will it take for them to see at the very least that the Democrats have failed them? And then we can work on the Republicans, how we'll do better. But what is rock bottom?
Yeah, was that Joel?
Yeah, Joel, and we talked to Alex as well, Alex Marlowe.
Yeah, and Joel did a great job. I think when we were down in LA and the president came, really highlighting that, just the failures that we've seen of leadership, in LA, but it's Democratic leadership at the local and state level that totally failed us, during these fires, and has been failing us, right? And so, I think we need to really highlight that. I would say the signs that there are some good signs on the horizon. We've registered over 1 million new Republican voters in California since 2019. I think that shows that people are finally saying, look, we've had enough of the Democratic Party and their leadership. We picked up 2 assembly seats in the last election. We picked up 1 more Senate seat in the last election. That's actually the first time in a presidential that we've done that since the 80s. So I think the trends are starting there. The cracks are there in the Democratic, hegemony here. But we got to keep being aggressive. We got to keep calling it out. And then we got to talk about how Republicans would do better, and our own solutions. So when we talk about wildfire, I say, look, we've been talking about this for years. Let's get out there and remove the vegetation that makes these fires a huge conflagration we can't stop. When we talk about homelessness, stop enabling them. Stop giving them needles on the street and letting them just hang out in front of businesses and in our public parks. When we talk about poverty, let's actually do something that brings people out of poverty. Let's remove the barriers to starting a new business, for instance, right? To getting a license in the state. We have some of the most expensive applications just to get a license, for different professions, right? There's a lot of things we could do to remove the roadblocks and make more opportunity in the state of California. And I think that's really what people are just crying out for.
Yeah. Tell me about the Trump effect potential in California. So we've been saying all special so far here that make America great again. Like to me, a proof of ultimate MAGA victory is when our cities turn red and California goes red. That's like when people really see like, wow, this is actually way better, this Trump style of Republican governance. What can Trump do from the federal government to help show that this is the way to go for people in California?
Well, I think he's starting to do it. He's just been a freight train, man. It's like one thing after the other where he's attacking these things that I think people are really frustrated with. Bloated government, right? Like bloated big government that's not getting things done, spending our money in crazy ways. So the whole Doge thing, I think, is really highlighting how bad that problem has really been. And I think people have been longing for that for a while. We talk about immigration, like finally getting on top of that issue. And yes, deport criminals. Let's go after criminals who are continuing to victimize our people. No one should disagree with that, right? That is a 80-20 issue. And I think all the recent polling shows that, right? And so what President Trump is doing on that front, securing our border, making sure that we're safe. I think these are all things that are helping to move voters over to us. And I would say we really saw it here in California, more in the inland part of the state. Inland voters who tend to be, at least lower socioeconomic. They're not having a lot of jobs and opportunities, but they feel forgotten, right? And they also are people that really rely on gas-powered cars, for instance, to get to work and get their kids around. Gavin Newsom's answer is to ban all gas-powered vehicles in California. We need those, and we need trucks to move our goods. So inland California, I think, really responded to Trump in a big way. And we saw like big swings from 2020 to the 2024 election, where more and more people were voting for Donald Trump. So I think we need to continue that by showing that we can get real solutions for people. And already I think that is happening. Seeing someone actually address these problems that have been plaguing our country, for decades now, I think is really helping, move those voters to our side.
It's great. We've got about 1 minute. What do people across the country need to know about Gavin Newsom, governor of California? Because he's definitely jockeying to run in 4 more years now. What do we need to know about that guy?
Don't be fooled by the hair gel and the slick talk. Look, this guy is probably the most inept governor of all time. Everything he set out to do, he has not accomplished. He said he was going to solve homelessness. It's gotten worse. Our poverty rate has gone higher. We've gone lower in education. Our kids are not reading at grade level in California schools under Gavin Newsom's leadership. Trust me, you don't want any part of this. You do not want this guy at the helm of anything. Nothing that he set out to do. He said he was going to lower our gas prices by going after the oil companies who are gouging us. We're paying more than anyone except Hawaii for gas. Everything this guy says he's going to do, he fails at. So please, anybody out there in other states, and I don't think many other states are really buying what this guy's selling, but please don't be fooled. Look at the record. This guy has been a terrible governor.
Do you think he's more inept or more corrupt?
Maybe a little bit of both, honestly. There's a lot of mismanagement. The guy likes to make big, bold announcements of things he's going to do and then never follows through. Mismanages thing. We saw that obviously during the fire. He laid off firefighters. He did a veto of a bill that would have kept seasonal firefighters online during these fires. He laid them off just before these fires happened. These are the kinds of, mismanagement that he's done. But also, we've seen, no bid contracts go to people who are his donors. We've seen him do, things for PG&E, for example, who's been a big donor to him, over the years that are not above board. The PUC gives us rate increase after rate increase. That's the Public Utilities Commission that he's put all of his friends on. Our electric rates just keep going up. They never reject a rate increase. These are the kinds of things that I think really just show, the ineptitude, but also the corruption of Gavin Newsom.
Let's bring California back. James Gallagher leading the way, California Assembly Republican leader. Keep up the good work, sir.
Thank you. Will do.
Appreciate you. Coming up next, we'll talk with Chef Gruel about does he see people in California waking up? Like, what else needs to happen? He was helping a lot of people during the wildfires. What are people saying on the ground in California? Can we turn California red? Right here, First TV. Welcome back to our special here on the First TV. Can California be saved? Can we become a red state? I keep saying we as if I still live there. I was there for 12 years. I'm gone now. Can they become a red state once again? Someone who's still there is Chef Andrew Gruel, the great Chef Gruel on Twitter. And he's the owner of a bunch of restaurants, but most relevant to this conversation, the Calico Fish House in Orange County. Chef Gruel, how you doing, brother?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Good to talk to you. How did you help people during the recent wildfires?
When the fire started, we opened our restaurant up as a donation center, a place where people could come down, get a free meal, and even stay. We actually had some people come and camp out in the parking lot for a while. And that turned into like a massive donation drive. I mean, we were driving upwards of 15 to 20 box trucks a day up to various centers through Los Angeles. We became the hub in Orange County where everybody was bringing stuff because they didn't want to go up to Los Angeles. So basically for 2.5 weeks straight, we were distributing upwards of $20,000 to $30,000 in products and maybe 1,000 meals a day up to Los Angeles, back and forth and back and forth. We had about 150, 200 volunteers over that 2 to 3 week period.
Why'd you do that?
It's just the right thing to do. California can never fix a problem themselves. It's always incumbent upon the people to fix the problem before they step in and actually make it worse in some cases. And being in the restaurant industry, I know hospitality doesn't end at the door. I mean, that's what we do. We did it during the pandemic. We've done it in between then and now, and we'll do it if there's ever another situation in which they need help.
Tell me about a story, anyone you met or talked to while you were there.
Yeah,
or were you a part of shipping them up north
two
at all?
Stories, actually. We had one guy who came down in this big old bus, right? It looked like an army trailer, and he had goats in there because he had been evacuated and he took a couple animals with him. And the guy was just distraught. He had a couple family members with him, but he was in this bus. And a lot of the neighbors here were like, "Oh, you got homeless people sleeping on the property." And I'm like, "No, you gotta meet this guy. He's unbelievable. He's amazing." And the neighbors were over helping because we had hundreds of people in the parking lot. And this guy's going in and out of his truck, helping us out. And at one point, we couldn't find a car to drive or another truck to drive things back up to Los Angeles. And this guy loads the truck that he was effectively living in with products, goes back up to Los Angeles and does a huge drop at one of the centers for us after he had just lost his home and absolutely everything, came back with more animals. The guy came back with more animals. Unbelievable.
Love that. So this has been a theme of today's show too, Chef. I was a part of, I used to live in Tennessee and then I was in San Diego for 12 and now I'm back in Tennessee. But when I was first in Tennessee, it was like a very easy joke to talk about how California should just be cut off and dumped into the ocean and who needs them and fruits and nuts and all this stuff. But it's like, and I've come to realize like, no, like it's part of America and it's a very important part of America and there's good people in California. I don't want to give up on good people just because a majority of the people vote Democrat and have screwed up the state in profound ways. But can you just speak to that, like why it's important to save California?
Well, California, number one, just is the most beautiful state, I think, in America. And I love all the states, but I mean, California, it's got this amazing diversity. I think there's a ton of untapped opportunity along the coastline and in the ocean specifically. I'm in seafood, so I'm always thinking about kind of like marine stewardship and then open ocean innovation and aquaculture. So that's untapped because of all the environmental nutcases. I think that California is still living in the 60s and the 70s. So we've got decades of opportunity that we can retake in California. Think about how the country has advanced. Well, California has not done so. But most importantly, the people in California, they are kind people. They're very laid back. We know that. That's the joke. You know, you say fruits and nuts, and that's pretty much true. But inside of every fruit and nut, there's something delicious. And I think that we can't abandon that. If you look at the numbers in California, I mean, it's really only a 10% switch. And you know, even in the last Newsom recall, like I said, he won by 10% against a no-name candidate who had absolutely no money to compete against him, and he won by 10%. I mean, it's so easy to drill down. We know this in what we saw in the last election, to drill down and create a landslide out of a lot of miniature opportunities and then create that trend.
Do you think this is a red pill moment for the people of LA, these wildfires and the subsequent, the pre-mismanagement and the after, post-mismanagement?
I do think that it is a red pill moment. However, remember, I mean, we're dealing with like the left of the left. I think people need to abandon the idea that we're ever going to change Los Angeles. I think that it's all of the areas around Los Angeles, because you're living in it. You know this. It's like living on the moon in Los Angeles. These people don't live in the same reality as everybody else. So we're probably not going to change a lot of those people. Although they might have that moment of kind of recognition, but whether they ever give up their religion, that's another question. It's all the other areas in which votes come down to 800, 1,000 votes, 1,200 votes. We got no voter ID. We're not cleaning out the voter rolls. So there's practical work that needs to be done in order to make this and make the arithmetic work in regards to winning in California, and it can be done.
Okay, I want to talk to you about illegal immigration. So one of the theories is that California went super far to the left after the passing of Prop 187, which banned illegal immigrants in every way. Schools, hospitals, welfare, everything. Like no illegal, E-Verify, like the whole thing. Totally shut down. And then the whole story is it never really got implemented for whatever reasons. And then like the Hispanics in California went far left. So then we were talking about Donald Trump coming in and deporting a lot of illegal aliens. How does that affect your industry and your restaurants?
That's a great question. I think people need to also realize that he's deporting criminals first, right? So like that's very important. And there are a ton of people across California, although we don't even know who's legal and who isn't anymore, because there's really this Social Security trade right now. And there's also a lot of people in California who have been here for like 40 years, and they're completely California washed, if you will, and then you find out they don't have their documents. Like, I don't know how they don't. It's just a weird thing in California. So it is kind of hard to tell. Like in other states, you can kind of tell like that guy definitely is illegal. In California, it's not so much. So I think that it needs to be, we need to make it clear in California through communication that it's really the criminals that are getting deported. And I think it's then incumbent moving forward after this first cleanup that we do take some of the people who have been here for years, figure out the ways in which they can be documented if they haven't committed any crimes. And then I think market that through California, because that's the only thing that they have on us on the left. But if they do start deporting every single person in California, it's like, okay, well, you know what? Then that's what's going to happen. And that's the reality, because it's not legal. And we're going to backfill those positions. I don't think it's going to affect me personally, but yeah, it's going to affect a ton of people. And it's unfortunate because they're not treating these workers well to begin with. So the businesses that are hiring people and underpaying them and treating them like junk because they're illegal, well, they should be cut to the curb anyways.
Would you ever leave California?
Yeah, I would leave California, certainly. I mean, look, Newsom ratchets it up on me all the time. I mean, filed a labor investigation during the pandemic against our businesses. I'm always getting investigated by different agencies every single time I go on some Fox News show. I mean, there really is a war. He uses the state to go after people. If it got so bad that he just started driving us through bankruptcy, I would still fight. I just might not fight so close to enemy lines.
Chef Gruel on the Twitter, Chef Gruel. You can follow him there. Please do. Keep it up, Chef. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I hope some of these themes have come through. And I know this is tough. I'm talking to me, back when I was in Tennessee 15 years ago, trying to make the case for California. How about this? Even if the people there deserve what they voted for, right? And they deserve it good and hard. Imagine a country where California is red. The left wants to make Texas blue. What if we made California red instead? They would never win a presidency ever again. Imagine how different the map would be. Imagine how different this country would be. Imagine if we won not only the politics of California, but the culture of California as well, with Hollywood and Silicon Valley, which is already turning more to the right, with Elon and the rest. Like, we can do this. And it's a good thing. We should try. Mike Slater, First TV. Spread the word.